I never thought betrayal would wear my son's face. Yet there I was, frozen in the doorway of the lawyer's office, watching his hand move confidently across papers that once carried my name. The sharp scratch of his pen seemed louder than traffic outside, louder than the blood pounding in my ears. Each stroke cut me away from the home I had built, the soil I had bled for, the roof that had sheltered every storm of our family's life. The room smelled of polished wood and old paper. The lawyer shuffled documents with a detached efficiency, sliding them across the gleaming desk. I caught a glimpse of the header, property transfer agreement, and my knees nearly buckled. Where my name should have stood in bold certainty, there was nothing. Nothing but the hollow absence of me. My son's voice, steady and businesslike, filled the air. Yes, just sign it over. It's simpler this way. Simpler for him, perhaps? For me, each word cracked like thunder. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but my lips pressed into silence. A mother's silence. The silence of someone who still cannot fathom that her own child would erase her with a pen. I felt humiliation rush through me, hot, suffocating, unrelenting. This was not a stranger stealing my property. This was the boy I had carried in my arms, the man whose future I had sacrificed everything to secure. And here he was, trading me away like an outdated piece of furniture. He never noticed me. He never saw me standing there, trembling, clutching my handbag so tightly the straps bit into my palm. He didn't even glance toward the corner where the small, unblinking eye of the security camera recorded every move, every word. That camera would become my witness, but in that moment, it was only me, my son, and the cold betrayal hanging between us. "Don't worry," he told the lawyer with a half-smile, sliding the papers back across the desk. "She'll never know. It's mine now. She'll never know." The phrase echoed in my head, mocking me, daring me to collapse under its cruelty. My throat ached with unshed tears. How many times had I trusted those same lips when they whispered, "I love you, Mom"? How many times had I believed him when he promised he'd take care of me? I should have stormed in. I should have shouted. Instead, I stood rooted to the carpet, watching the final stroke of his pen sever my place in my own home. My humiliation was complete, my silence deafening. But the camera was still recording. And though he didn't know it yet, every second of his betrayal was captured, preserved like evidence waiting for judgment. As I finally turned away from the office, my heart breaking in 1,000 pieces, one thought burned hotter than the shame. This story wasn't over. Not yet. When I close my eyes and think of this house, I don't see walls and windows. I see the hours of my life, poured into every corner like mortar between bricks. It wasn't given to me. It wasn't luck. It was blood, sweat, and pennies stretched so thin I thought they might tear. I remember standing in front of the bank all those years ago, papers trembling in my hands, signing a mortgage that looked bigger than my courage. My husband's health was already failing then, so the burden rested mostly on me. I worked double shifts at the diner, taking the morning crowd and the late-night drunks, until my feet blistered and my back ached. When tips were low, I brought home leftovers instead of groceries. My children never knew the difference because I seasoned everything with love and lies. "No, sweetheart, I'm not hungry. I already ate at work." Vacations? We never had them. New dresses? Only when absolutely necessary, and even then, mine came from secondhand racks. Every time I put $1 away, I told myself it was a brick for the future, a brick for the house, a brick for my children's security. Piece by piece, the dream began to rise out of the ground. I planted the garden myself, kneeling in the soil after long shifts, my hands raw but my heart steady. I wanted fruit trees for the children, roses for the joy of it, and a little patch of herbs by the kitchen so the food always carried the taste of home. Even now, when I walk past those roses, I think of the nights I dug until the stars blurred in my eyes. This house became more than shelter. It was sanctuary. It saw my husband's final days, the quiet way he held my hand in the living room as the oxygen machine hummed. It saw my children's birthdays, the walls covered with streamers I taped up in the dark after my shift. It saw Christmas mornings when the gifts were few but the laughter was plenty. It saw tears, reconciliations, even grandchildren bouncing on my lap, their sticky fingers reaching for the same cookies my own children once begged for. And yet, the more life I poured into these rooms, the more invisible I became. At first, my children used to marvel, "Mom, I don't know how you do it all." But slowly, their gratitude dulled into expectation. The meals appeared because that was just Mom. The bills were paid because Mom always figures it out. The holidays sparkled because Mom will handle it. What was once sacrifice became duty. What was once duty became background noise, and soon, it was as if the house itself gave them everything, not me. There is pride in what I built, yes. But there is sorrow, too, in how quickly sacrifice becomes invisible. You give and give until the giving erases you. The very roof you sweat to raise becomes the same roof under which your voice no longer matters. Sometimes I would linger by the doorway after everyone had gone to bed. I would press my palm to the frame, still warm from the day's life, and whisper to myself, "This house knows me. Even if they forget, these walls remember." But as I stood in the lawyer's office, watching my son's pen slice me out of my own story, I realized with bitter clarity, memory isn't enough. You can't live on memories when the people you sacrificed for decide to erase you anyway. Looking back now, I wonder if the betrayal really began at that lawyer's office, or if it had been growing quietly, like a crack in the foundation I refused to see. The signs were there, subtle at first, then sharper, more deliberate. But when you're a mother, you excuse, you forgive, you convince yourself it's just a passing mood. It started with little dismissals. I'd suggest repainting the kitchen, and my son would wave a hand. "Don't worry about it, Mom. We'll decide later." We. As if I had become a guest, no longer the final voice in my own house. I told myself it was nothing, just the natural way of things when children grew up. But the unease lingered, gnawing at me. Then came the daughter-in-law's comments, soft daggers wrapped in smiles. She'd push her plate back and murmur, "Oh, it's fine, but my family cooks this dish differently. Lighter, healthier." The words stung more than I admitted. My cooking had once been the pride of every holiday, the taste of comfort. Now, in my own kitchen, I felt like an amateur. My traditions brushed aside as outdated. Money became another silent wound. "Just a little loan, Mom, until payday," my son would say, grabbing bills from the envelope I kept for groceries. Payday came, payday went, but the money never returned. If I dared to mention it, his tone sharpened. "Do you really need it that badly?" "You've always managed." It was as if my sacrifice had turned into an endless well he believed would never run dry. But the moment that seared deepest came one evening at dinner. The table was full. My son, his wife, the grandchildren, laughter spilling like wine. I had roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, my famous green beans, the kind I'd made since he was a boy. I expected gratitude or at least recognition. Instead, my daughter-in-law leaned over to the children and whispered, not softly enough, "Don't eat too much, kids. We'll have real food later." They giggled, forks clinking, while my cheeks burned hotter than the oven. I sat there smiling faintly, passing the bread basket as if nothing had happened. But inside a chill spread. For the first time, I felt like an outsider. Like the house I built no longer saw me as its heartbeat, but as a guest overstaying her welcome. That night, when I cleared the table alone, I paused at the doorway, staring into the dim dining room. Plates stacked, crumbs scattered, the echoes of laughter still hanging in the air. And I asked myself a question I had never dared before. Was I blind to the truth? Had my place already been slipping away long before the papers, long before the signatures? The thought struck me hard, cruel in its simplicity. Maybe they don't see this as mine anymore. It began on an ordinary afternoon, the kind where the sunlight slanted through the curtains and everything felt deceptively calm. My son had dropped by, his voice casual, his smile just a little too rehearsed. "Mom, I just need a bit more," he said, tugging at his sleeve as though the fabric could hide his urgency. "We've got some bills piling up, you know how it is. Just until things settle." I had heard this before. Too many times. Each time, my heart had softened and my purse had opened. But that day, something inside me resisted. Perhaps it was the lingering sting of the dinner humiliation, or maybe it was the weight of too many sacrifices I'd watched vanish into silence. Whatever it was, the word rose in my throat before I could stop it. No. The syllable dropped between us like a stone in still water. My son's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I can't," I said, forcing my voice steady. "I need to keep what little I have. I'm not giving more." For a moment, he just stared at me. Then his face hardened, unfamiliar, like a mask slipping into place. "But Mom," he pressed, voice low and edged, "you don't even need it anymore. The house is paid off. You don't go anywhere, you don't buy anything. Why let money sit when it could actually help?" Behind him, my daughter-in-law chimed in, arms crossed, her tone dripping with disdain. "He's right. You live too simply. Honestly, it's selfish. Holding on to it when we're the ones struggling. Don't you care about your own grandchildren?" The words struck like blows. Selfish. A word I had never imagined being aimed at me. Not after decades of putting their needs above my own. My throat tightened. I wanted to defend myself, to shout about the long nights, the missed meals, the years of being invisible while I carried them all. Instead, guilt rose up like an old reflex, pressing me into silence. Still, the word lingered, fragile but firm. No. The air in the room shifted. My son's eyes turned cold, his jaw clenched. He didn't argue further. He simply stood, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. My daughter-in-law lingered a moment longer, her gaze sharp and cutting. "You'll regret this," she whispered before following him out the door. I sat there in the quiet, my heart racing. The walls felt suddenly thinner, the house less secure. Had I just shattered the fragile peace? Or had I finally glimpsed the truth, that my generosity had become their entitlement? That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house reminded me of the growing distance between us. I pressed my palm to the wall, whispering the phrase that always steadied me. This house knows me. But even the walls seemed restless, uneasy. And then the phone rang. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, almost indifferent. "Hello, this is the office of Williams & Kane. We're calling to confirm your availability to sign the property papers next week." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "Property papers?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the caller replied, flipping through what I imagined were neat stacks of Betrayal. "We've been instructed to have your signature prepared. We just need you to confirm a time." I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles whitened. My mouth opened, but no words came. An invitation I had never requested was already waiting for me. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't just about money anymore. The envelope came on a gray morning. The kind of morning when even the birds seemed too tired to sing. I almost didn't open it, thinking it was another advertisement or some meaningless notice. But the heavy paper, the official seal, it made my stomach knot before I even slid it open. Inside, the words blurred as I read them once, then twice. Property transfer agreement. My name, once printed clearly as owner, now appeared in faded ink, almost like a ghost. Beneath it, new lines, new signatures waiting. My son's name, bold and confident, in the space where mine should have remained. My hands trembled as I traced the letters. For years I had guarded that deed like a treasure. It was more than a paper. It was proof of my life, of every sacrifice that had carried us through lean years and long nights. Now, staring at the document, it felt as though I had been erased with a single stroke of a pen. I clutched the deed copy I kept tucked away in the drawer of my nightstand, the one I sometimes pulled out when doubt whispered too loudly. My copy still bore my name, strong and certain, as if it was shouting, "You existed. You mattered. This was yours." But the letter in my hand told a different story, one where my son had already set the wheels turning to take everything from me. The chill that spread through my chest was worse than any winter storm. Betrayal has a way of freezing you from the inside, layer by layer, until you barely recognize your own reflection. I could still hear his voice from days earlier. You don't even need it anymore. Now I understood. He hadn't been asking. He had already decided. Summoning courage, I called the lawyer's office listed on the letter. The receptionist's tone was polite but dismissive, as though I were an afterthought in my own life. Yes, Mrs. Thompson, we have your file here. The documents are in process. We'll need you to come in for the final step. In process? My voice cracked. I never agreed to this. I never gave permission. There was a pause, followed by a careful, professional distance. I see. Well, your son has already provided most of the necessary authorizations. It's simply a matter of formality at this point. Formality. As if my existence, my signature, my very right to the home I had built was reduced to a box to be ticked. I felt smaller than I had ever felt before, like the walls of my house might close in and swallow me whole. When I hung up, the silence of the room was unbearable. I pressed the deed copy to my chest, rocking slightly, whispering through tears. Was I already erased from my own story? The question hung heavy, unanswered, echoing through the rooms that once carried my laughter, my husband's voice, my children's footsteps. Now all I heard was the creak of betrayal under the weight of my son's ambition. And deep down, a terrifying thought grew roots. If they could strip my name from the deed without me knowing, what else could they take? I told myself I wouldn't go, that I didn't need to see it with my own eyes. But something stronger than fear pulled me back to that office, as if the truth itself demanded I bear witness. My steps were slow, heavy, my palms damp as I pushed the glass door open. The polished brass handle felt colder than ice. The lawyer's office was too bright, the kind of sterile brightness that leaves no shadows, no place to hide. Papers lay neatly stacked on the desk, and there he was, my son, my boy, sitting tall in the leather chair, a pen balanced in his hand as though it belonged there more than it had ever belonged in mine. I stood silently at the back of the room. They didn't see me at first. The lawyer leaned forward, tapping a page with his finger. Right here, he instructed. My son nodded, sliding the pen across the line with practiced ease. The sound of ink on paper cut into me like a blade. Every stroke seemed to erase me further. I searched his face, desperate for hesitation, for even the flicker of guilt. But there was nothing, only calm determination. He wasn't struggling with conscience. He wasn't conflicted. He was certain. The lawyer gathered the signed pages, slipping them into a folder with a tidy click. My son leaned back, exhaling, and then came the words that shattered what was left of me. Don't worry, he said, his voice steady, confident, almost smug. She'll never find out. It's mine now. It was the final blow, delivered so casually, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle already forgotten. My knees nearly buckled. My throat burned with words I couldn't speak. The boy I had rocked to sleep, the man I had defended to neighbors, the child I had prayed for when he was sick, he was gone. In his place sat a stranger willing to carve me out of my own life. I pressed a hand to my mouth, afraid even my breathing would betray me. My chest heaved with silent sobs, but I stayed still, frozen, a ghost in the room. And then I noticed it. The unblinking eye of the security camera fixed in the corner, red light glowing. Recording everything. His signature, his smile, his words, captured forever. The betrayal that might have slipped through silence was now preserved in a frame that could not lie. I clung to that thought, though it brought no comfort yet. My heart still cracked under the weight of his certainty. My silence felt like defeat, but also like survival. I knew this was not the moment to scream or to fight. So I slipped away as quietly as I had entered, the sound of my son's laughter fading behind me. Each step out of that office felt heavier, but I carried with me a single truth. He believed he had already won, and he had no idea the camera was still recording. That evening, the smell of roasted chicken filled the house, though it might as well have been ashes on my tongue. My hands went through the motions, setting plates, pouring drinks, but my mind replayed every second from the lawyer's office. His voice, calm and assured, rang in my ears. "She'll never find out. It's mine now." The family gathered as they always did. My son sat at the head of the table, grinning, laughter spilling easily from his lips. My daughter-in-law busied herself with side dishes, her voice bright, almost theatrical. The children bickered playfully, reaching for rolls before I could pass them. To anyone else, it looked like a picture of warmth. To me, it felt like a stage where everyone played their roles while I sat in silence, carrying a secret heavier than stone. I forced my smile, lifting my fork with a hand that shook so badly I prayed no one noticed. But then, mid-meal, he spoke. "You know," he began casually, slicing into his meat, "we've been thinking about some new plans for the house. Maybe remodeling, maybe even renting part of it out. Fresh start, right?" The words nearly stopped my heart. My grip on the fork tightened, metal clinking against the plate. My daughter-in-law nodded eagerly, adding, "Yes, it's too much space the way it is. We can make it more useful." Useful? That was the word they chose, as if the years I poured into these walls were waste, as if the life built here needed repurposing. I stared at them, smiling, laughing, carrying on as though I were invisible. And in that moment, that's exactly how I felt. Humiliation swept through me, hot and merciless. I wanted to slam my hand on the table, to scream that this was my house, my sweat, my sacrifice. But instead, I stayed frozen, the polite hostess, nodding faintly while my insides cracked. My son's eyes flicked to me only once, quickly, before returning to his meal. Not a trace of guilt, only calculation masked as charm. Their laughter rose around me like walls closing in. The children told jokes, bread passed from hand to hand, and I sat with a smile plastered on, tasting nothing, hearing everything. Inside I was screaming. Outside I was silent. When the plates were finally cleared, I excused myself quietly. No one protested. No one followed. I walked down the hall to my bedroom, shut the door, and locked it with trembling fingers. Then the sobs came, violent and raw, tearing through me until my chest ached. I buried my face in the pillow to muffle the sound, afraid even of my own walls hearing my weakness. For hours I wept for the boy I had raised, for the life I had given, for the cruel way it was being stripped away. But as the night grew still, one thought pierced through the fog of despair. The camera was still recording. His betrayal wasn't just mine to bear, it was caught, preserved, undeniable. And that truth, faint but fierce, kept me breathing. The morning after the dinner felt different. My eyes were swollen from crying, my body heavy with exhaustion, but somewhere in the wreckage of my grief, a small flame flickered. I sat at the kitchen table, the house unusually quiet, and pressed play on the video from the lawyer's office. My hands trembled as his face appeared on the screen. As his voice filled the room once again, "Don't worry, she'll never find out. It's mine now." Each repetition cut me open, but this time, the wound bled into something sharper than sorrow. It bled into clarity. I leaned forward, pausing the video at his smirk, at the careless tilt of his chin. For the first time, I didn't only see betrayal, I saw proof. Proof that could not be denied, not twisted into another manipulation. Proof that my silence had captured what my voice could not. I whispered to myself, repeating words my mother once told me long ago. Trust is given once, but dignity is reclaimed forever. The phrase steadied me, cooling the fire so it burned with purpose instead of rage. No, I would not storm into his house and scream. I would not let them twist my pain into weakness. If they wanted a game of power, I would play it carefully, deliberately. A strategist, not a victim. I gathered the papers strewn across the table, the old deed with my name bold and certain, the new letters where I had been quietly erased, and the recording device still humming like a secret ally. My fingers no longer shook as they had before. Still, I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. For years I had carried every burden by myself, convinced it was my duty as a mother, as a wife, as the keeper of this home. But this betrayal was larger than my strength. It demanded allies. So I picked up the phone and dialed the one person I trusted beyond question, an old friend who had stood by me through births, funerals, and every storm in between. Her voice, warm and steady, was the first balm on my raw heart. And when she gave me the number of a lawyer she trusted, I wrote it down with a hand that no longer wavered. By the time I hung up, the weight pressing on my chest had shifted. Still heavy, but different. It was no longer the weight of helplessness. It was the weight of armor being strapped on. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of my resolve. The day of the confrontation dawned with a sky as gray as my mood, but my heart beat with something new, steel instead of sorrow. I walked into the lawyer's office not as the invisible woman they thought I was, but with my head high, my lawyer at my side, and the recording tucked safely in my bag like a sword waiting to be unsheathed. My son was already there, sitting in the same leather chair where I had watched him sign away my life. His wife perched beside him, her lips tight, her eyes sharp with calculation. When they saw me walk in with my attorney, a flicker of unease darted across his face. He quickly masked it with a smile, but I had seen it, and that was enough. "Mom," he began smoothly, as though nothing were wrong. "I didn't expect you here. We've already handled the paperwork. It's just a formality now." A formality, that word again, meant to strip me of substance, to reduce me to a rubber stamp. But I didn't flinch. My lawyer spoke first, his tone measured. "Actually, this meeting will not proceed as you expect. Mrs. Thompson has evidence that requires immediate review." My son laughed, but it was brittle around the edges. "Evidence? Mom, what are you talking about?" I reached into my bag, pulling out the device. My fingers no longer trembled. With one click, the room filled with the sound of his own voice. "Don't worry, she'll never find out. It's mine now." The lawyer's pen froze midair. The room went still. My son's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing with no words to fill the silence. His wife slammed her hand on the table, her voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. You're just being selfish, holding on to a house that's far too big for you. We're your family. You should want us to have it." Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't rage this time. It was strength. My voice rose steady and fierce. "This house fed you, clothed you, raised you. Every wall holds the echoes of sacrifices you will never understand. But it will never be stolen from me." Her face twisted, ready to hurl another insult, but my son's eyes betrayed him. He looked small, cornered, caught in the web of his own greed. For the first time, he couldn't talk his way out. The lawyer cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Mrs. Thompson, with this recording, there is no question. These transfer papers are invalid. Your ownership remains intact." Relief surged through me, fierce and hot. I reached across the table, picked up the forged documents, and with deliberate slowness, tore them straight down the middle. The sound of ripping paper cracked like thunder. My son flinched. His wife gasped. And I felt something break free inside me, the chains of humiliation snapping apart. "This is my home," I said, my voice echoing in the tense room. "It always has been. It always will be." For a long moment, no one spoke. My son sat rigid, shame shadowing his face, though pride kept him silent. His wife muttered under her breath, but the venom had lost its sting. I gathered my papers, my lawyer at my side, and stood tall. As I turned toward the door, I felt the weight of the past months lifting. Betrayal had tried to erase me, but dignity had brought me back. The battle was over, and I had won. When I look back on everything that happened, the part that still cuts deepest is not the paperwork or the deception. It's that the betrayal came from my own flesh and blood. Strangers can wound you, but only family can carve straight into the heart. For a long time, I let that pain silence me. I thought love meant tolerance, that being a mother meant giving without limit. But I learned that blind love can destroy you, while self-respect can save you. I went from humiliation to dignity, from silence to justice. And I carry those lessons like armor now. I want anyone listening to my story to remember this. Never confuse sacrifice with surrender. Protect yourself, legally and emotionally, even from those closest to you. Because the ones who should cherish you the most are sometimes the very ones who will test your worth. This house, these walls, they know me. They remember every meal, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered into the dark. And though others tried to erase me, I reclaimed my place with the only weapon stronger than betrayal: truth. So here is my moral, the line etched into my heart: love your children, but never let them erase your worth. I share this not out of bitterness, but out of hope that someone listening might find strength in my voice. Maybe you've felt invisible. Maybe you've been pushed aside, humiliated, or taken for granted. If so, let my story remind you, you are not powerless. And now I ask you, what would you do if your own child tried to steal your home? Tell me in the comments, because your voice matters too. If my story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and stay with me for more true confessions. Together, we'll keep finding dignity in the places betrayal tried to bury it.